Here with SCD stories so we can find out all about sickle cell disease and what it means for the individuals and the families who deal with this disease. We all battle it, whether we know it or not. But the most important thing is we've got to ask ourselves this question. How is it that we have stories like we're about to hear today as we interview and talk with Shalawn James? How is it that it is one of the least funded or the most common hereditary blood disease and yet one of the least funded? How is it that that could happen? Well, I say it's because we don't associate it with individuals and their families. We don't associate it with real stories and real live situations. Well, today we're going to find out. I have here before me an advocate in general. By nature, she cares. An advocate, even if her child didn't have sickle cell disease, she would be caring for your child and my child. What's it all about? Let's find out. We're going to talk with Shalawn James of Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, and we're going to find out exactly, not what just makes her tick, how does sickle cell disease affect her and her family, and what does it mean for her child, her young son, 18-year-old Jarek. Shalawn, how are you today? Thanks for being with us.
I am doing amazing. Thank you for having me, and thank you for this opportunity to share.
Well, it's a pleasure. You know, one thing that's important for me is to make sure that I don't drown out all that you've been through because I know oftentimes in these interviews I can be shocked. And I don't want to be shocked. I want to make sure that you understand that I empathetically hear you, and I want our viewers and listeners to be able to hear you. So, Shalawn, you have a son. His name is Jarek. And how old is your son, Jarek?
Jarek is 18. He will be 19 in May.
18. Born in 2002?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
In 2002, I had just become executive director for the South Central PA Sickle Cell Council as a young 30-something-year-old. I was a young man in those days. But interestingly enough, I didn't know you. But if he's born in 2002, at what point were you told in the hospital or while you were expecting during your first, second, or third trimester? When did you come to find out that Jarek has sickle cell disease?
Yeah. So that's Jarek's dad and I didn't even know that we carried the trait.
Okay.
Um,
Oh, wow.
so history of this disease, it was not commonplace for us to get tested and even know if you carried the trait. So you couldn't take the appropriate steps to get the genetic counseling and those kind of things to kind of curtail or skip this disease from one generation to the next. And so I was about 2 weeks postpartum. I got a phone call. I was living in Maryland at the time. I got a phone call from the Department of Health. They had done a heel prick in the hospital when we were in the hospital after I delivered, and they had done a heel prick. And a young lady called me, and she simply said to me, and I will never forget this as long as I live. She said, "Are you the parent of Jarek Griffin?" And I said, "Yes." And she said, "He has sickle cell disease. This is a very serious disease. He could die. You should follow up with your pediatrician."
Oh, man.
And I was just floored. Um, I was 20 some years old, a new mom, 2 weeks postpartum, had this bundle of joy, and then was just told that he could die with no explanation, no idea of what that meant. I had very little knowledge of sickle cell disease for myself, and I was a mess. I was a mess for quite a while from that.
I can see why. As I hear you say this, Shalawn, I'm floored myself. The challenges of dealing with just giving birth, forget sickle cell disease or any of that stuff. You have a child, a new life you have to care for that is very fragile within itself. And then
Mhm.
you get this phone call. Wow, I get
Yeah.
it. Now, this is something that if you're listening and watching, you're a parent. Many of you are parents. Some of you are soon to be parents. You could only imagine the challenges around what it means to have a new fragile life in your home that you now are responsible to feed, change, put to sleep, all those things, and guess because they can't talk. You have to guess what they're feeling when they're crying. And now you have something put on top of that. I could imagine, Shalon, what that meant for you. Now, at what point, what was your first experience? What were the experience that really made it true for you? So you've been told you didn't see any symptoms or signs at that point. You just were told because of a blood prick. So At what point did you have an incident where you're like, oh boy, I'd better put on my big girl pants and get ready to go to work here with his child? What happened? What was that like? What was your first experience with? Okay, so this is what sickle cell disease is.
Yeah. So, in addition to being a single mom, his dad, who has been very active in his life, was in the military,
Hmm.
and so he was stationed away at the time in Japan, and so I was alone. I had family support, but I was really alone raising Jarek. And my first experience, they tell every newborn if they start to turn yellow and get jaundice, and so that was very difficult for me to even ascertain that if he was jaundiced, because we have a lot of melanin in our skin. My son is lighter than I am, but to tell jaundice from the skin is not easy. But
Hmm.
his eyes got almost Cheshire cat from Alice in Wonderland yellow, and I took him to the hospital, and we were treated less than favorably, and so they said, well, we need to give him some fluids, we need to check things, and they couldn't find a vein. And so my first experience with him in the ER was them holding him down at 2.5, 3 weeks old and putting an IV in his skull.
Wow. Wow. Okay. All right. So now you're 20 something and
Mhm.
you got this baby that you adore that God's given you. And, I'm a parent. I have three sons. And so as you watching, you may have your sons and your daughters who have these things. That alone has its own mental growth periods that you have to get through. And as a parent, initially, Jarek's father, who's in Japan, I know when my firstborn was born, I was in the army.
Mhm.
And I know what that means. Like, okay, when I get home, okay, got this kid, um, can't wait to get on their first tricycle or help them to see them start walking and all those types of things. And these are standard thoughts. And as a mother, you might be thinking, oh my gosh, I can't wait to the first time I'm waiting for him to get on the bus when he's leaving for school for the first time. There's so many different milestones that occurs in a child's life. What you're hearing today from Shalawn James is her story. We call this SCD stories. We call it SCD stories because it is imperative that you understand that this disease is so much more than a title, a label to put on someone, but there are real life incidences that are life threatening and unfortunately that impair every part of the family. Now, I am encouraged by your strength as you're a mother of a child with sickle cell disease and your child hasn't even had their first birthday and you're having these experiences. I have to ask you this question so I I can sense this, and it's also I imagine it's making you stronger as you get through that first time they're holding him down and setting that IV in, and you see his jaundiced eyes. As a parent, if you just see your child with pink eye, you're all torn up, but to have
Mhm.
jaundice and then also need to be in the hospital having people jabbing, I know that that couldn't have been easy for you, Shalon. So there are different phases of life in a child, and early childhood development is what we're talking about. Now you get to the age where Jarek is approaching school age, and you have to
Mhm.
have all these thoughts in your head, like, okay, what happens if he falls in the playground? What happens when these types of things happen? What was that like for you? What was the transition for you to okay, my child has to be educated and get on with life. We can't let sickle cell disease be a roadblock. He has to be able to get on in spite of it and make adjustments in his life. And you have to make adjustments as mom. Dad has to
Yeah.
make adjustments as dad. Talk to me about
Mhm.
that. What was that like for you? There's transition into okay, my son has to be educated. We're going to do it from home. He's going to be in school every day with other kids who can be cruel. What's going on in your head? How does this work for you?
Yeah. So, when Jarek was 2, he had a stroke that left him partially blind from sickle cell. That is
Mhm.
something that can happen because of the jagged nature of the cells. And so he had a stroke when he was 2, which left him
Mhm.
partially blind. And so transitioning him into school wasn't like everybody else's experience. I spent a number of hours and days with the school staff talking about his needs as a sickle cell kiddo who needed frequent hydration.
Hmm.
So he could go out and play on the playground with the other kids, but he couldn't get dehydrated. That would throw him into a crisis. Which also meant that he had to frequently use the bathroom, and putting in those accommodations for him to make sure that those things were taken care of. He'd also have pain, and his pain is not managed by just Tylenol and ibuprofen. And so that required me to then look for employment that gave me flexibility to be able to come to school to dispense narcotics to him. Because at that time, in 2007, schools weren't willing to give narcotics to kids, especially somebody as young as my son, 5 years old. They weren't willing to give him narcotics, but that was what he needed. And so I had to set up, and we really had to put our lives around his education and him going to school for those 6 to 7 hours a day, and making sure that our lives really molded around that process. And so I worked a lot of evenings. I worked a lot of overnight to make sure that I was available. I worked a lot of swing shift, picking up hours. I put my career on hold so that I could make sure that I was 100% available, because there was times that he would go to school and he would need picked up because his pain was just too much to sit in a classroom all day. And so those things really impacted us as a family. And but through all of that, it made us stronger and it made us closer. My son and I, he tells me all the time I'm his best friend, and I tell him he needs to find friends his own age. But he, he does have friends his own age.
Sure.
But our bond is like no other, because we struggle and we managed and we went through the miry clay together. And that has made us much stronger. And I had to learn how to speak life and existence into him, because he wasn't the same as his friends.
Sure.
And I remember him saying to me, I just want to be the same as my friends. And I would have to tell him, and some of the history of sickle cell is sickle cell disease came about from, in Africa, the malaria that was killing hundreds and thousands of Africans and Northern Africans and Greek and Mediterranean individuals. The mutation then was made, and that's what caused sickle cell. And so I have to tell him all the time, you are a warrior. You were made to survive. You are from genes that are built from greatness. And so, yes, you have this disease that is sometimes very, very, very debilitating, and you can't do the things that other people can do. But let me tell you, son, you are king. Yes, and you are built from greatness. And so we have those mantras in our household, and it's sickle cell disease is devastating, but it has given us as a family this thing that is like no other. And I don't see it in many other families. I see it in sickle cell families all the time. Sure. But I don't see it in other families the way that I see it in sickle cell families.
Well, you're hearing it live. You're hearing it right now from Shalawn James. Her story. This is SCD Stories. And it is real. It is not made up. It is not hyperinflated. It is so that each of us can understand that we together can make a difference. How can we make a difference? There are a number of ways that a difference can be made. We tell you that you can, first of all, subscribe to scdstories.com. You also can donate by going to donatescd.com and make a contribution to help enhance the quality of life for those who deal with sickle cell disease. And at the same time, assist us in getting the word out and supporting the individuals and their families. Many who literally begin seeing strokes in their children long before the age of 5, and others who have so many other challenges related to it. And as Shalawn said, it's interesting that most people don't even know that this is not a Black related disease. This is related to geography. And with the geography, it was one of the body's defense mechanisms to ensure that the human body can survive malaria, which was running rampant. One of the things that we have with us is our bodies are asympathetic and can find ways to survive, even if it put other parts of our life at risk. So understand this. Jarek is just as important as any other child. Shalawn is just as important as any other parent. In fact, because of this, and because it didn't become a stumbling block and became a stepping stone to find more strength in themselves, you're hearing it right here from my dear sister Shalawn James. Shalawn, thank you. You know, as a parent, yes, 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 you had to encourage your child and know that even if it meant becoming his best friend until he can get that in his head, that he is someone of value, and this doesn't define him. This is just something he carries with him. And yes, he is different. So as we go through that, those are things that a parent will deal with in early childhood development. The other things that parents go through is this thing of adolescence. If your child has no disease, not sickle cell, nothing else, adolescence itself is a battle. It is something that is difficult as your child tries to find themselves, identify themselves, how to express themselves. What do I do with this whole thing I got inside my body, chemistry for the opposite sex? There's all kinds of stuff raging through a child. As a parent, Shalawn, tell us about that. What was that like for you and Cherrick as he's at this age, body's changing, and maybe differently than from some of the other kids because of sickle cell, but yet it's changing. And now new challenges arise. Like, okay, what am I going to be doing? What is my area of strength that I'm going to start to have to focus on? Because, of course, young adulthood's coming. Talk to me as a mother. What's this like for you, and what kind of obstacles did you have to get around with sickle cell to deal with this?
Sure. One of the most prominent things for us and for Jarek, and it still to this day hurts my heart. Part of sickle cell disease is that the blood vessels, because they don't move as freely through the body, they can become stuck, for lack of a better word, in every area of your body, and that causes pain. And so Jared developed a condition called priapism. And basically what that is where blood gets stuck in the penis. And so he would have unintended erections, and it would be erections from the blood just being stuck in his penis. And so as an adolescent in school, he would have these bouts that were not sexually driven, but would cause him to have an erection. And then the embarrassment around that was significant. And I had informed the school that he had received this diagnosis, and that when he felt one of these episodes coming on, that he needed to be excused so that he could do what the medical professionals were saying that he needed to do to take care of it. And he had a teacher that chastised him and made him stand in front of the class because he asked to go to the bathroom. And the teacher felt like it wasn't a good time for him to go to the bathroom. And my son came to me in tears. And of course, I was enraged. I was angry. I was sad for him. And I had multiple conversations with the school therapist, and got to get a conversation with the principal, who told me that you people just keep doing these things. And if you don't want him to be here in school, then we can make arrangements to be elsewhere, but he's not going to get a free pass to just come and go from class.
Wow.
That went over like warm rice. And it just shows the lack of understanding. And I was a mom that I gave the school a binder of information about sickle cell disease. I gave them a binder of what Jarek's needs were. He had a 504 and an IEP. I put copies of those binders in there. I made a binder for each and every one of his teachers so that they had their own binder. I met with them before the school year started and said, hey, listen, please read this. Please look at this. If you have any questions, all of my emergency contacts are here. All of his grandparents' emergency contacts are in here. His father's emergency contacts. Call us. If you have questions, we are open. We want this to be a successful collaboration. And all of that fell on deaf ears. And my son was embarrassed. in school to the point where he did not want to return. And so from that point on, he returned he went to be homeschooled, and we homeschooled him. He did go back to high school for about a year. But after middle school, he was primarily homeschooled because of the embarrassment of that teacher and that experience.
What you're hearing is the story of Shalawn James and her son Jarek, and what they had to go through in dealing with sickle cell disease from birth all the way to adolescence. And the challenges that occur at this time, as you're hearing, are real. They are certainly interfering and disruptive to the proper education, the proper needs, and the proper health care of a young man coming up. And what you can find out is, what can you do? Certainly, hear the stories. We cannot make a difference if we don't really know what it is other than the very name of it. Sickle cell anemia or sickle cell disease. There are ongoing therapies, new discoveries, and trials that are going on with drug companies around the globe for this horrific disease. And no, it is not a black disease. You will find people who are of a white complexion, Latinos, as Shalawn had mentioned earlier, Greek, some Italian, different people. And it has nothing to do with being black. It has everything to do with a body's ability to defend itself a long time ago. And now it's geography related, as we live in a world where there are no boundaries. And people have migrated to different parts of the world. I'm fortunate enough, I'm not from Maryland. When I was married in 1988, my wife and I had to be tested. I do have sickle cell trait, and I knew it since I was a child. But my wife, who's from South America, does not have the trait, but she was still tested. It was a norm for us in order to get married in the state of Pennsylvania. Now, what you've gone through, it's horrific. However, yes, it has given you and your son both a greater bond and a greater love for each other and a greater love for life, and understanding how fragile it is. I also believe, Shalawn, one of the reasons you're a great advocate in the communities in which you serve is because you, my dear sister, have been given the gift of being able to deal with the pains and the challenges with overcoming, and that's made you better at it. Today, I want everyone to note that, yes, there are things you can do about it, things that you can do to make a difference. And one of them is you can subscribe to us through our Facebook. You see on the bottom of this page, our Facebook, our LinkedIn, our Instagram. Subscribe, follow us, so you can hear more of the stories and understand that it's real. See some of the progress, some of the success stories that occur because of people like Shalawn James. Shalawn James is also a recent board member for the South Central PA Sickle Cell Council because she's a great advocate in the arena of mental health, because of her skill sets that she brings. It just so happens that she has a son who also is one who has sickle cell disease. Now, as we get back to my dear sister Shalawn, I want to say, now, although I've not met you personally, I am encouraged to know that there are still champions out here who will fight in spite of and not hate you, what you've gone through with your son, and not have an all-out hatred for their minimal understanding and thinking that it's a you people disease. I commend you and thank you for that. As I get down to the final phases of our questioning, I think about the fork in the road that young people go through. That is, okay, I'm going to be a young adult, and I've got these things with me. And I also will have an attraction for other people. I don't know. I got this private thing that has always left me vulnerable when it comes to people. I learned in the school systems, the more people knew about me, the more embarrassed I was. I also learned that the more people knew about my vulnerability, the more some have taken advantage and used it to ridicule me. So now, as a mother, this has got to be challenging, as he may find himself fond of someone and have to get through that. And as a mother, you're going to be thinking, oh, you better not break my boy's heart, right? You might be thinking like that. Talk to me. What is this point for you like? And what are you both doing together to try to work through how he gets through it? Because we know the answer isn't to avoid it. The answer is to find creative ways to work through it. Talk to me, my sister. What's going on with you guys with this area?
So Jarek is 19. He's 18, about to be 19.
Hmm.
I don't give him more age than he really is. But he is in college. He's in his first semester of college,
Hmm.
and the girls are they're out there. I have to say, just as his mother, he is a handsome young man. Um, and and so we have those conversations about what does your health look like with a relationship, and how do you find somebody that is supportive uh, in what you're going through, and somebody that isn't just there for the short the short term. And
Hmm.
so it's been a process with him of me allowing him to really just kind of get out and learn a lot of different young ladies and those kind of things.
Hmm.
And what he has learned is that there are those young ladies that are what the young folk like to, or maybe it's my age, like to say ride or die,
Yeah.
that they are there. But I have taught him to be open and honest and to be transparent.
Okay.
This is what I bring to the table. I have sickle cell disease, and there are going to be some times where I'm going to be sick. And so my energies aren't always going to be fully invested in you during those times, because there are going to be times where I'm sick. I take my medication, I go to my therapies as I'm supposed to, but there are going to be times. And just kind of putting it out there, maybe not that first date type
Mhm.
conversation, but
Sure.
very early on, so that you know where a person is, and giving them an opportunity to choose whether they are going to be a, an active participant or an hindrance in your process. And for him being okay with those people that say this isn't something that I can do, and giving them the grace and space to make that decision and walk away, knowing that there are plenty of people in this world that are going to say, I like you for who you are. I like you for the person that you are, and your character shines way bigger than this disease. And so that's just a part of your carry-on luggage for our flight together. And it be okay with them. He has met some dynamic young women who he doesn't necessarily date, but are young women, and I'm impressed with them, that are 18, 19, 20 years old, that are call him and check in on him.
Hmm.
People that he's met through work experiences that are like, hey, I was thinking about you. I was worried about you. I saw this thing on TV and it was talking about sickle cell. And there's a drug that's out right now, and it talks about sickle cell as one of the symptoms. If you have sickle cell disease, you shouldn't use this. And so his friends are calling him. It's like, I saw that on TV. And so they know Jarek as the kid that has sickle cell, and they know Jarek as being such a strong kid, because
Hmm.
a lot of his friends will tell me, and I believe they tell him too, that they couldn't go through what he goes through, and so they admire him. And he's found an amazing amount of strength through that. And so I have tried to encourage him to speak his story, to live his truth, and that has carried him a long way. And I think that has helped him in going into from transitioning from adolescence into adulthood. It has really helped him become a really dynamic young man, who is not ashamed to say, I have sickle cell disease. My eyes are yellow because I not because I'm smoking weed, or I have this I'm out using drugs. It's because I have sickle cell disease. And
Sure.
he just puts that out front. And so people are, more times than not, people are curious enough to then ask questions and give him a platform to tell and to share. Um, and so I encourage anybody that has sickle cell disease that is not living your truth
Hmm.
to live your truth and tell your story, because people want to know and people want to understand. One of the worst things in life is that prejudices and discrimination and those kind of things, I firmly believe, come from a lack of education. And when people don't know, they make up their own narrative for you. And so we have decided as a family that we are not going to allow people to make up our narrative. We are going to tell our narrative, and we're going to put it out there in front so that we control the dynamic. We control the narrative. And so you can't make up a story about my son and his eyes being yellow, because he's already put it out there that his eyes are yellow because he has sickle cell disease.
Love it. I love
Um,
I love that.
yeah,
You know,
yeah.
you speak like a champ, and it sounds like you're ready to charge hell with a squirt gun. I love the fire and the energy around your son. Instead of seeking rescue, you are finding ways together to navigate through it. It's a true pleasure to have you with us today, Shalawn. And when you were talking, you made me think about something. You talked about people that Jarek meets at work and so forth. So that work experience, there's some preparation to go into that when the gets a job. You know, most of us have to think about. They're going to ask, is there anything we need to know about before we consider your hiring or your work, your employment? Have you ever been arrested or in trouble for drugs or something like that? Those are normal things that people have to go through. The trauma of, oh, good Lord, what if they found out that I am divorced or whatever it may be? Now, in your
Mm-hmm.
case with Jarek, he had to think about, okay, health wise, I got to let them know. Otherwise, when I'm missing and I spend 3 days away in the hospital, they're going to think I'm. So, what's that like? Can you give me a little bit of that as we close out? What's that transition like for you and Jarek? And then I hope we'll be able to get him back for an interview in the forthcoming weeks.
Absolutely. Yeah. So his first job was actually at Giant,
Okay.
and
What's
I
Giant? For
said
those listening that may not live in the Northeast, what exactly is Giant? What kind
Giant
of
is a
job is it?
grocery store.
Okay.
Giant is a grocery store. So his first job, he was stocking at Giant. Um, and he said this was a lot of work, and I said, well, that's what work is. It's always a lot of work.
Yeah.
Um, but I said to him, I said, when you go into work on his first day, I said, you need to have a conversation with HR and your immediate supervisor and say to them, you have sickle cell disease,
Mhm.
and explain to them a little bit about what it is. You don't have to go into great detail, and let them know, hey, I take my medication. There are times when I have pain and those kind of things, but I am committed to working here. I'm committed to being a great employee, but there may be some things that hinder me sometimes. Can you guys work with me? And
Mhm.
I said, what you do is you put the onus back on them
Yeah.
to say, yes, we're able to make this relationship work with you, or no, we are not. And lo and behold, unfortunately, 3 months into that job, he suffered a massive brain aneurysm and he was out. And I called Giant. And for those of you that want to know, Giant and Camp Hill,
Mhm.
um, I called them and I said, Jarek had a massive brain aneurysm and he's going to be in the hospital for quite some time. And they said to me, he is a great employee. His spirit and his character stands out. Um, when he is ready, he is welcome back here at any time. We will hold his job for him. And that, to this day, they sent him a basket in the hospital, and they really rallied around him as an organization and as a store
Mhm.
to make sure that he was okay. And it was powerful for him, and it's emotional for me because I know how quickly people can just be like, okay, you're
Yes.
done.
Yes.
Like, you're done. Like, we're gonna fire you, but you're always open to come back and get your job back and reapply. They were like, no, we're gonna hold his job for him because the person that he is and his character spoke louder than this disease that was trying to take him out. And he he left. I told him about it, and he said, wow. He was like, they really do like me, and they really don't care that. They just care that I'd stock the shelves good, Mom. And I was like, yeah, you do. And that was powerful for him. I think people don't understand how much life you can speak into somebody
Yeah.
just with little acts of kindness and little acts. And don't get me wrong, sickle cell disease and research is way behind. In 2002, they just had started giving kids maybe a year or two before penicillin. And that proved to extend the life expectancy of sickle
Yep.
cell disease patients for many, many years. I was told when Jared was first diagnosed that he would die before he was 18. He's 18 going on 19. I had an aunt that just passed a few years ago who was 89 years old and had sickle cell disease. And she lived her whole life, and you wouldn't have known that she had sickle cell disease. And that's how far we have come. People perish from this disease. We're perishing from this disease very, very early in life.
Very
And so your donations and your money and your just speaking words of encouragement and words of not looking at folks as if they are different and accepting them is so powerful for these individuals and individuals that don't think that they can work. Employers need to open their doors and say, hey, we have a space here for you, and we're going to honor that commitment to you as a sickle cell patient, and we're going to work with you through this, and because you're a great person, and not make it about their sickle cell disease. Like, there's so many things that you can do. Of course, donate, because that money goes towards great things. But sometimes if you don't have the money, your words, we all have words, and we can choose every day whether we are speaking words of life and empowerment, or we are breaking somebody down and destroying them. And so just those little things, if you see my son or see somebody else from one of these webcasts, speak life and existence into them, because literally every day they're fighting for their lives.
every
They're
single day.
fighting for their lives every day. And if you speak those little words of encouragement, I promise you, it will go so much further, and be impactful for them.
Shalawn, wow. To be honest with you, I need to subscribe to the Shalawn podcast and webcast because you really are a fireball. And it's encouraging to note in a world where I've got grandchildren. We have my wife and I have 5 grandchildren, and we know that our youngest granddaughter has sickle cell trait. And we know that there are things she's going to need to go through in preparation when it's time for her to meet someone and then procreate, blah, 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 blah. But it's wonderful to hear your encouraging words and know the difference that edifying of your son has made from the Giant Foods Corporation and their employment and the way they work with their people. That goes far. That's a completely different paradigm than what it was like in high school for him or grade school. And so I see that. We want you, each of you who are watching or listening, to know that the paradigm is going to change for families everywhere if we together can understand and know more of what's behind the individuals who have this disease. No, it's not an excuse. No, it's not. You see, unlike many diseases where you can see it, you don't know if someone's had 6 or 7 strokes and 9 or 10 mini strokes. You don't know that. You don't know if they've had an aneurysm or brain bleed of any type. You can't know if they have fever or if, in fact, they're dealing with other, what we call secondary and tertiary diseases related to the disease. But I'm here to tell you that through your efforts at giving towards donatescd.com, and or you can use the QR code at the top of the screen, you can be a part of making a difference. If you subscribe and follow us on social media, you will note that you have an opportunity to, let me just go ahead and get rid of this stuff. So you can actually have an opportunity to find out what things are going on from walkathons, and an opportunity. We like to give things back. We have a beautiful health kit, which we're giving out to some people that was donated from one of our sponsors. We also have T-shirts and things of that sort. We have golf outings throughout the year when there's no COVID. There are things you can subscribe to that will help you increase your awareness and yet at the same time allow us to add value back to you and your family. Shalawn, thank you. I'm looking forward to an interview with Jarek as well coming up. We can't thank you enough. If you didn't know it, if you're enjoying this webcast, you can always follow us on our podcast by going to iTunes or Google, Amazon, Spotify, Pandora, as many places in which you can subscribe. In the meantime, this is Dwayne Gold from SCD Stories and my good friend Shalawn James. Shalawn, thank you again. And is there any final words you have to say as we say goodbye?
Be present, be like, share, click, thumbs up, double heart, double tap if you're on Instagram, all of the things. Share it with your friends, share it with your churches, share it with your basketball group, share it wide, because education and knowledge is power. And so I just thank you for this opportunity, Dwayne. I adore and just love the Sickle Cell Council and all that you are doing and all that you've invested and bred into my life and into Jarek's life. And we just thank you and bless you for all that you all have done.
It's a pleasure. You know, they say that life doesn't really matter much until you invest yourself into things that are much more important than you. And I have the great pleasure of being able to serve alongside you, Shalawn, and with you, and on behalf of all families that deal with sickle cell disease. Thank you for attending this webcast podcast. Looking forward to hearing and meeting with other families and individuals as we have our webcast podcast every Tuesday at 11 a.m. You don't want to miss it. This is Dwayne Golden with our special guest, Shalawn James. Have a great day. God bless you. Like, share, subscribe. Take care.